So welcome back, guys, to another episode of Project Peak Performance. This is the review of one of our pack members, James Humphries Stone, and his previous podcast from last week. So welcome back to everyone listening to the show and what's going to be happening as we dissect our own pack member.
Sounds brutal.
Sounds ominous.
I know, it does sound brutal. And actually, the episode is far from brutal. I would say that's the first thing I wanted to highlight over actually was I genuinely thought I was going to be coming and listening to an episode that James was just going to talk about the avenue. And it was almost like everyone had to squeeze the avenue out of James whilst he was talking about other stuff. And also, hats off to Ian and Dan for some killer questions that really pulled through and got him to really think about his responses.
He was on the spot, wasn't he, a little bit from time to time? He kind of, I don't think he was expecting the questions that we threw at him because although he's a pack member, we wanted to do it a little bit against the normal script just for that reason, to keep him on his toes. And yeah, it was good to keep talking about the why, the passion, the purpose, the drive. And that I think came out quite a lot in the episode. I don't know what you thought, Alex, but that's what we really tried to push.
You could hear certainly on 2 or 3 questions, his brain almost having to work something out on the spot or, work through a question that he might not have come to the answer at yet. So, yeah, it was a really good listen. I really enjoyed it. I've known James for a number of years anyway, and I've always just found him such a positive, welcoming, warm person. But I found it fascinating to sort of, pull on the strings of what's got him to that point. Not that he's not, maybe naturally that way inclined, but there are things that have led him to compartmentalize moments and feelings or come to the point of understanding what you can control and who you need to be in certain situations, even if there's other stuff going on. So yeah, it really helped me understand him a little bit deeper as well for someone that's known him for a few years. That was really, really interesting.
Yeah,
what I found interesting is I obviously with my coaching side, so I come across a lot of leaders, and it is a rarity to have a leader like James, and obviously in his other positions, that is very much more emotionally intelligent and tuned with himself, how he looks at stuff and how he looks at the world and how he analyzes himself, but still have the competitive nature. That it's like, I think it's probably it's the essence of a strong leader, like rather than a weak leader that's blame on everyone else. I don't really look at myself and all the sort of side of it. So it was awesome to see it. And obviously working with James and his team, I do see that, like, the guy has talked the talk in that episode, and I work with his guys and they are that way. He doesn't intervene. He allows them to flourish. He allows them to jump on. And any conversations I tend to have with him is like, oh, they learned this today and this is really good. And that's a rarity I find with leadership. So you can see why the avenue is going to go with more and more success, purely because the leadership at the top is correctly set up.
And also sorry, Ian, go.
I was going to say the main thing I think for a lot of people that were watching was it's relatable. There's a lot of relatability with James's episode, and I think we've had some amazing guests on, haven't we? We've had world champions. Me and Alex have got I don't know whether we'll let the cat out the bag yet, but we've got a superstar tomorrow. We've obviously had Ronaldo's sleep coach, etc., black belts. But I think James's story is really relatable for a lot of people as well, especially in the property industry, but just anyone in life that's kind of built the foundations in an industry and then had that driving force to kind of start their own company or do their own version of it, climb to a high level, made that jump, had a family, gone from what he classified as being selfish to then having kids where you no longer can be selfish. Yeah. Even working with his wife in business as well, the kind of that relationship. I'm sure there's a lot of people that overlap there as well. So there's so many points that were relatable for, I think, people that are listening and watching that would get a lot of value from listening to his experience on that as well.
And when you say relatable is the word, because I found myself incredibly aligned with a lot of the things that he says he is and what he's done. I mean, from my perspective, I count myself as a very competitive person with a sporting background. So again, that came out straight away in his episode. And also just, he spoke about his mum and the trigger that losing her at 50 years old had on him. You know, I lost my sister to cancer at 21, you know, and that gives you a sense of perspective. It gives you an extra drive. It gives you other layers that you wouldn't have necessarily learned as quickly or gathered if you didn't have that experience. So I found myself going through the episode almost like, there's so many things that we're similar on. And I'm sure that'll be the case for other people listening, where they've experienced, you know, they've got that competitive nature, but have experienced trauma or loss, and how you come out of that the other side.
Did you find it quite relatable in when he said, I almost locked myself away for a period of time? For you, Alex?
I suppose my reaction to losing my sister, you know, the diagnosis to death was incredibly quick. And she'd spent 2 years at university, so I hadn't had her in and around my life day to day for 2 years. My instant reaction was to, you know, think, you know, she wouldn't want me wallowing. There's nothing gained in me just sort of sitting on this and, you know, going through the motion. So I went and took my football team. It was Wycombe Wanderers at the time. I went and took my youth football team and wanted to see 8 and 9 year olds out having fun and, you know, just go and get back into reality as quickly as possible. And I suppose that's been my ethos ever since. Of course, your brain goes back to memories and, you know, missing her, but I've very much been head forward. And I suppose it's numbed me a lot to things that a previous me might have got upset about or, you know, got worked up about. It sort of just keeps me grounded. So my heart rate probably is always in a pretty stable pattern, regardless of what happens to me, because I quickly put perspective on things and think, okay, my mission is looking forward. Like, what's next? So, yeah, maybe.
I think it's that it's relatable because that's what's similar sort of thing with James. You know, you could tell he's got the focus on what he wants to do. He's started to understand who he is more following the loss of his mum and the direction, but not taking it too serious in that capacity, which I think is the element where creativity comes through. Like if you need the heart and the vibe and that like Ian, it's same replicated with what you've done at the Avocado. It's a similar sort of leadership part to that. Like, what did you find with you, Ian, with your journey going into that similar sort of partnership, self-employed model, leaving the top of that chain of a previous thing? Like I've interviewed you in the past, and it's pretty much almost like a similar sort of process of like, you know, we've just got the house, wasn't it, the house and stuff like that, and it's like it seems to be, if you want to set up a business, try and buy somewhere and get pregnant, because then
there's a lot of similarities, and I think it's probably why me and James get on quite well, because, you know, we've got a similar outlook in terms of, I think we're both quite positive people, both quite creative people now, and also think we're very kind of family centric as well. That came across a lot in the podcast with him. You know, it was really about his core, his nest. It was always, I think he was ranking things, you know, in a 1, 2, 3, and I have that trilogy that I talk about as well, with kind of family, health, and wealth. And it was always that the avenue was the third player, and, you know, family was number 1. So a lot of similarities, and yeah, I think it was very interesting just to hear. I think almost the fact that he doesn't have the answers yet. You know, it's a journey that is just starting. It's a new journey. You know, when they downed tools and just went traveling, you know, the story of how they got back just before lockdown and didn't get trapped in South Asia, and that element of things, how things just naturally aligned in a sort of strange way. And a lot of that sometimes happens when you're very focused on a particular goal, or you're very decisive. A lot of those things fall into place that way. I think it's when you're fluffy about your decision making and you're a bit unsure on your goals, that's when you kind of just catch yourself just sort of washing through the ether a little bit. James is the opposite to that. Things come to him and he'll make a decision to either capitalize on the opportunity or not, but it's all driven by, does that benefit him when he turns 40? You know, was the big thing. He's got kind of 4 years, 3.5 years to get to that point. For me, it's next week. And it was quite interesting listening back to it, because I was thinking, well, yeah, I see the same milestone. It's just my distance to getting there is a little bit shorter. But his thing around sort of turning 40 and having X, Y, and Z laid out was all driven by the foundations of his family, really, and being in that place for his family, so he could spend more time with them and be around more and do more exciting things, and be very much a parent in their lives. So I totally relate to loads of that, actually. Yeah,
I think it was interesting because he's obviously got the age of 50 in his head of when he lost his mother, and her dad died at the same age. So it's almost like he's got this sense of mortality driving a lot of that behaviour as well. So I think he called it his big kahuna goal, didn't he? Which I quite liked. Big kahuna goal of wanting to know, wanting to be in control of when I work, how I work, ultimately life on his terms for, that 10-year period in his head, but I'm sure a lot longer than that as well.
it's funny because yesterday I was re-listening to it, and in the morning I went for a walk, and I listened to him talk about that. It horrified me a little bit, actually, kind of that he's got that outlook, that mindset of, I think it was his mum that passed away at 50, and then was it her dad that passed away at 50 as well? And he's got this fear of kind of not getting past 50. And I was kind of really reflecting on it a lot. And then my dad called me about an hour later, and he'd just been to the doctors, and he was having a bit of a deep conversation with me about a few things. But he then brought up the fact that my granddad, his dad, passed away at the same age my dad will turn next year in February. And he was talking to me about exactly the same thing, the fear of actually going past where his dad had turned. And I was like, wow, this is all a little bit surreal. And then I always joke about, with my wife, funny or not, but I always joke about when I turn 40, it's half time for me. So get me some oranges. And yeah, it's kind of all of a sudden I'm thinking, actually, you've got to get that out of your brain. You've got to get that out of your mindset, and just focus on not having an end date. I think is probably the most important takeaway for everyone from that.
What was Rob? What was your was there any key takeaways from you that you wanted to lean in on?
I like the idea, going back to what he originally said. He said, I process it. Can I control it? Yes or no? And like, there's so many people out there. I was even just speaking to one of the team members, and they were like sort of moving, and they were talking about stuff. And I was saying, like, can you control your outcome? No, you can't control it, but you can control how you react to it. And it's a very basic concept, but a very concept that not many people just come back to as their everyday toolkit. Like, can I control it? Can I influence it? Like the inner, outer, stuff like war and stuff like that. You can be bogged down in the news and get obsessed about that sort of side to it. But it's like, can I control that? No. Some politicians are doing that. Like, what do I control in my day-to-day basis? And I've noticed it working with him, like from a leader's perspective. Like they got involved, and he's then delegated to his team, because he's like, I allow them to control that outcome because they're better than what I do with it. And that's a big step for a leader to be able to do that. So as soon as I heard that, I was like, oh, and now it makes sense of why he's the way he is and how he leads. And like you,
go on,
sorry.
No, I was going to say, I suppose the skill of the leader is how quickly you can decipher that, decision-making process, and then quickly move on.
Sorry, one session, that was it. And he was like, right, this is not my idea. I'm better suited elsewhere. I'll leave you guys to it. And you can see that he imparts a confidence within his team. But like you, Ian, that, the loss of, my dad's had 3 heart attacks. My mum had a stroke last year, and you have that more mortality on your life of thinking like, God, I've got good genetics. When's it going to happen with me? And I literally was having a conversation with Kel literally last night when we were in bed. I was saying, the reason why I do like the fasting, I try and do the running, and I like eating healthy, and I'm more thoughtful on what I'm putting in my body and how much sleep I'm getting, is because the odds are against me in that capacity, or of the genetics. So I've got to at least try and do something to change that. And I feel like that's similar to what James is going through at the moment, and why he's a part of Project Peak Performance. Is not only like I want to make sure I've got more time with my family, but also I'm healthier in mindset and body to achieve that as well.
100%.
Because you could go to the age of 40 and go into that and go, oh, I'm going to, like Dave's episode. Dave's a great example of that. I want to provide for my family, but you can do it in the wrong way of doing that. So yes, you have the money, but then the family hate you in that process. And then you have to almost backtrack and rebuild those bridges. So from James's perspective, especially working with his partner and their big goal towards what they're looking to achieve, but like you said, Ian, family first with everything behind, it's a different calling of a mission than I just want to make some money.
I found it interesting that they decided they climbed to the top of the tree effectively when they were at Purple Bricks together collectively. And then obviously they were having health related issues where they were trying for a baby, and they kind of got to the stress point, the cooker point, where it was boiling, and they just decided to just go to, I think he said it was South Asia, Southeast Asia, somewhere like that, just go traveling. And obviously at the time they'd planned to go for like 4 months. They ended up going for a month for medical reasons. And I just found it interesting that I wonder if he'd wanted to do that on his own and she'd said no, or the other way around, whether they would have done it. I wonder how influenced they are in each other's decision making now, because they're married, they've got children, they work together, they run a business together. What was interesting for me, I was sort of sitting back listening to it thinking, I wonder how many of the decisions get made in their house that now have to be made collectively, because they are like really one, aren't they, really, in kind of everything they're doing, and how supportive that must be. But at the same time, is it frustrating as well? So I'm yet to ask him that question, but I want to ask him that question. Is the fact that you are now so close in what you do a frustration, or is it a kind of supporting foundation, within the business decisions they make? Because James seems very decisive to me in terms of how he looks at things. I don't know if you guys agree.
Yeah, 100%. I think he sort of mentioned they're both quite similar characters as well. So whether they often come to the same decision, or whether actually they do have differences of opinion and how they sort that out.
I think, like, when you look at it, like he said about boundary setting, and they're very similar in how they are. And he said it can work really well, or sometimes, because you've got two strong-minded, strong-willed people. I love the story about that whole process of being told you're not going to conceive, and then you can conceive, and going through that process. And I think sometimes there's a lot of people put stress on conceiving, and actually the stress is the underlying factor of why they might be struggling to conceive, because of, like the environments of the female. If they're in stressful environments, naturally nature's like, I don't want to give birth to someone in these environments. So it just goes to show, like, as they started to do the traveling, and the environments of like work and that lot and the fun environments came through, like that then naturally happened, which is awesome. And like the journey of how everything slotted in, wasn't it? It was crazy. But I think, sorry, Alex.
I think with James, like I've mentioned about what a sort of warm, welcoming character is, I think given that's so obvious, I can't ever remember seeing him angry, really. So, when you're that way inclined and you give off that demeanor, I think a lot of good things probably come to you and happen just naturally. It just seems that's the way, because he is that kind of character. So I'm sure there's a little bit of that in there as well.
It's acceptance of what is about to be deserving of you. And I think that's, like, if you think about what he said, I've developed that. I've realized we need to be a culture that I'm not having to work really hard. I just need to work smarter with my time. And then he was saying, like, I do a checking in with myself. I'm looking to do business diversification, my portfolio, my personal life, etc. So, like, when he's strategically thinking about that side with the mindset that he has of curiosity, naturally those things will start to fit in place, because there's no emotional blockers or mindset blockers that might be refusing that to be invited in. Because you never know. Like, you think about all the steps that happened. If you were with a closed mindset and you were scared and you didn't take those steps, think back from like 2019 to where they are today. There could have been so many no's if they just lived in fear than just curiosity. So yeah. And I like the morning routine he has. Like, it's a good morning routine, and we've seen it. He does his walks and stuff like that. He's posted in his groups, and I think he's learned from our group, being a part of us. Like the conversations he had when we had Dimitri on. He's taken those bits and actually then enhanced it into his own lifestyle. So he's a learner and an implementer as well.
Yeah,
I mean, James seems like his sort of mind does work quite quickly. A lot going on, likes a lot of things on the go. But it was interesting to hear about how he has to, sort of deal with or get discipline to not get distracted and put order and consistency into understanding what's priority at the time, getting routines. So actually, it slows him down as well. I mean, Rob, obviously with yourself. And your sort of ADHD brain, can you resonate with that? Do you sort of have anchors and
you have to? James is of a similar, probably on the spectrum of some sort, without being diagnosed. You can tell because it's almost like the Sixth Sense. You know that movie where it's I see dead people. It's you see some sort of special needs. Partner Cal has it. She's like that person has it because she works with special needs kids. But he has, like, I have to, like my routine, cold water therapy, I have to put that in place to make sure I set my mindset up for things like compartmentalization. I use what I call chunking in that. It's exactly the same process. Like, I'm going to do this for this period of time. I'm going to do this for a period of time. Otherwise, if you sit there, you're like, I'll just get my phone out. I do this, and you'll just do random stuff. So the morning routine is a fundamental thing, which has changed how my brain works, because he said it, discipline. I'm a massive advocate on discipline over motivation. Discipline, don't motivate yourself, because you could be not motivated to get in the cold tub, but you can be disciplined to get in the cold tub. So his words were proof of that. Like, I'm disciplined, I hydrate, I meditate, I get myself ready for the day. And that is a massive thing then he could take forward for that day, especially if he's prioritizing his routine. People who, like me, where I've got ADHD, if I don't have a routine, that's actually a massive strategy that I need to use in my brain, because give me a day's work and I'm on my own, I'd end up trying to set up like several businesses, start setting on a new thing, reading this book, listen to a podcast, and it'd just be never ending.
Rob, do you think that's also someone that's become creative? A lot of people say, an entrepreneurial flair. I think it's an overused phrase. I don't like it personally, but that entrepreneurial flair, people always want to start the next thing, do the next thing. I actually think just people that have gone into a creative space, into a creative environment, are often people that are always seeing new opportunities, and they're trying to do everything. And, if you look at kind of your circle, all of a sudden there's little lines off of the circle everywhere that you could easily go down that path. And I think starting a new business that I've found, I don't think I was very creative at all where I was previously. I think I was built in an infrastructure of a state agency, which is very departmentalized, KPI led. We're siloed into, you do this role, you do this role, you do this role. So I don't think I was very creative at all. Whereas when I had to start a business, I became creative because I was kind of pushed into it. And I feel that James has got that creative flair. You talk about that in terms of your ADHD around, you're a creative person in that aspect of it as well. I just wonder whether that's something that there's certain moments in your life where you just all of a sudden start to, it's a bit like opening to the Matrix. You just start to see things in a different way. And I don't know whether it's kids, whether it's business, whether it's a trigger moment, like in James's case, his mum passing away, but whether you just start to see new doors open. And that seems to be the path that James is on. And I can relate to that because I'm in the same way now. I constantly keep seeing opportunities and doors open. And James said a lot of his day is actually around working out what he has to say no to rather than what he has to say yes to. And I totally get that, because that's the way I feel at the moment. Is I want to do this, but I can't do it all. But you try to do it all. So it's an interesting path, but I wonder if that's a creative flair, Rob.
So it's a really interesting point on it. Like a lot of clients I work with, I call it the boxing strategy or chunking. So boxing strategy, for the brain actually to be creative, one, it needs supporting and trusting environments, which is you experienced when you actually decided to stand on your own 2 feet here and be your own. I'm going to find out who I am and what my flair is and what my business represents. And the second one is, if you don't give the brain the rules to play with, it just thinks of everything. So you have to have that North Star. I actually speak to the Avenue with Holly. I actually call it the moonshot. Like, what's your moonshot? And you might find that it's like Apollo 13, where you've got a toilet roll paper, some tube. You've got to try and make it back. You haven't got all the tools there to do it, but at least go for the moonshot. And if you don't have a moonshot and you're like, I'm out in space, your brain can't be creative because it needs something to be boxed in for it to think about it a bit more deeper, and then flair comes from that. So when I speak to a lot of clients I coach, I say to them, right, what's the moonshot? And also, like, let's break down some of the big goals you've got into small categories to enable you to be creative on those small categories to get there. So if you think about James' perspective and also how I work with you in the past and like your direction with the avenue, it's exactly the same process of like, I believe that this is what we believe in value wise. This is our mission. This is what I want to go with. And I will say no to stuff because I know what my North Star is or my moonshot. I don't need to get involved within that because that's a distraction. And it's a very powerful thing to do because it almost stops you needing everything. I don't need it all. I want this and I want that, but I don't need it all. Like, I'm controlling the power of my own destiny, and this is my mission.
It's interesting because I went to see Jordan Peterson talk. Must have been 3 or 4 weeks ago, and he very much spoke about, you know, his version of a North Star, but ultimately, initially, there's always going to be stuff going on in the world. He referenced war. He referenced things that the media will spit out as negative things happening in the world at all times. And he said, you have to acknowledge that those things are going to happen, but you have an obligation initially to yourself and your closest ring of influence to be positive around the future and how you live your day to day, because what that will deliver is a positive outer ring of close family. When they're all doing the same, it will then just continue until you've got communities of people and people that you can positively influence, and then everyone's sort of working towards a bigger goal. And it was just interesting because he was not saying ignore bad things are happening, but there's an obligation to reframe and just make sure nothing puts you off your goal, and then ultimately the goals of people around you. So yeah, I thought that was quite a timely point to bring that up because I found that topic of conversation fascinating.
It goes back to that whole, he said about, can I control it? Like, I can't control this. So like, I can control my own destiny, but there's going to be stuff that happens on the perimeters that might affect it. But it's how I can control with how I deal with it, not allow me to control me. And you can clearly see that, especially when you've got I by 40, I want to achieve this. And similar with you, Ian, by this period of time, I want to get to this bit. I don't want to be, what did he say, an old man in a nice car driving past. I don't want that. That doesn't serve my purpose, especially where he's got that morbid look on 50 effectively. But you're right in what you're saying. I think a lot of people get influenced by the wrong stuff, and then that stifles creativity of actually what do they want out of their own life. Hence why I don't watch the news. I haven't watched the news in a good few years because like people come to you and you're like, what? I don't know what's going on here, like, unless it's affecting. But actually, there was when I went to the Wellbeings Award about a month ago, there was a keynote speaker there, and he was in the 80s. He was captured. He was trying to negotiate. He was captured for like 4 years, and he's done massive stuff out in the Middle East and all sorts of stuff like that. He's like a humanitarian aid out there, and he actually talked about exactly the same thing, Alex. He was saying that you can't influence conflicts, but what you can do is you can change communities, change people next to you, change them, how they think, how they work. Communities build on communities, those communities, and that change brings the change. So when you look at, even back to what James was saying about, you know, his business and how he sets it up, you know, he is curious with everything. He's a change person, as in like I accept change in that capacity, but he allows it to be uncontrolling in that element too. He likes to be free flowing, which I think, going back to originally you said, Ian, is that where the creativity comes from.
Yeah, I think it's always interesting to hear someone that's kind of so driven towards certain goals, and it's always interesting because that's the definition of what we're talking about with peak performance. Everyone's got their own version of, you know, the project itself was to try and help our community feel like they've got more moments in their life that they feel at that peak level. And as you go through life, you know, you look at, I kept saying to James, you know, what were the mountains? I asked it at the beginning, I asked it at the end. And everyone, you've just always got a different project or a different peak that you're looking to climb. And it was very interesting. Kind of Dan kept pushing him back to the beginning to try and ask, where does that come from? Where does that leadership come from? And James struggled to answer that, actually. I've probably because he's not reflected on it too much. And he may, I mean, he's probably watching now, and he might have reflected a little bit since listening back to it. But it's hard, I think, to diagnose that yourself, kind of where these skills come from. You know, why was he the football captain in all the clubs? Why is he the leader that he is now, you know, with his business? It's hard. But what's very clear is he's got targets, he's got goals, and he's got a decisiveness to make actions happen. And I think for anyone that's listening out there that's kind of in a zone, in a kind of, you know, sort of daze, if you like, of what they're doing, that's the big takeaway for me. Is James, in the same way all of us have done now ourselves, why we put this project together, is we know what our targets are. You know, I know what my life goals are. I know what my annual goals are. I know what my goals are for this month. And I know the decisions I have to make to get there, the work I have to put in to do it, and the things that I have to say no to as well. And I think that's the real big takeaway from James's episode, is that's a blueprint in whatever version you're living that anyone could adopt and adapt to and get success and get peak performance from, really, I would feel.
I would say when you think about the essence of Project Peak Performance and what we try and achieve, like the everyday person walking down the street, and they can have amazing peak performance in their own career, not the celebrity status of everything. Like, it serves the projects for that. Like, James is the pinnacle and the core of why he's a pack member to that part to it. You know what I mean? Like, he's been at the heights of the Purple Bricks, and then he's come back down to reality to find his own peak. He's explored the avenue, obviously, of what he's doing now, etc. And also he's taken a view of kids, yeah, like, so you can sit like that. And that's when I was listening to it, I was thinking, like, be able to put any formula in part of, like, give me someone who you think is on peak performance, Project Peak Performance. James is that identity, because he hasn't made everything that he's got there. He's got his goals set up, but he's taken these different routes and different avenues and worked out what's going on there to try and get there. And he's got his relationship sorted. And it's in theory, like, there's some balance to what we're trying to achieve and on his direction within that. Not, I'm on my phone all the time in front of my kids because I want to make the money to spend time with my kids. And it's like, as a dad of similar ages, like, and like you want to make sure that doesn't happen, because I remember as a kid, my dad working really hard to be like, I'm going to get you somewhere. And I was like, I never saw him. So it was very reflective, and I thought, it's a pinnacle of actually what we're trying to achieve at Project Peak Performance. It's like, if you are someone who listens to the episode and was relatable to that, then you're in the right community for what we're trying to achieve with you.
He lent in on his definition of peak performance was having balance, which was quite nice. And when reflecting on peak moments in his life, he referenced the journey he went on and growth he went on after losing his mum, having his kids. And I quite liked, Ian, you sort of, you know, pulled him up on a third one, which was, you know, there's another one that's still to come. So that last one probably summed him up in terms of he's continually on this journey working towards something, and he will have another big peak moment, but what it is, not yet determined.
One thing as well that I think a lot of people, is worth talking about, because I think a lot of people, some people do it and some people don't. I learned it at a young age in agency that when I looked around, there were people in the office that were fantastic. I was fortunate that I basically launched my career in a dream team. You know, you get to an office, it's a dream team. It does crazy records, wins everything. And I was fortunate that I cut my teeth in one of those. And I looked around and I realized one of the guys, a guy called Adam, was like unbelievably organized. He wasn't the best on the phone. He wasn't the hardest worker, but he was unbelievably organized. He didn't miss a trick, like OCD level organization. Someone was just over the top passionate, an absolute scattergun all over the shop. So passionate, so positive. Coincidentally, the top valuer, probably the best valuer I've ever worked with. Just over the top enthusiasm. Someone else was just a grafter. They weren't talented in any particular facet. They were okay in all of it, but they were there first in, last out, like just a grafter. someone was really, really good with people, just like really good at articulating themselves. And I kind of I was like, which one should I be? And where a lot of people go wrong is they try and copy someone else's superpower. They try and copy someone else's strength. What James does very well is he absorbs other people's skills and does his own version of it. It's something that I've learned as well, and I'm sure you guys can relate to that too, that picking up on someone else's superpower doesn't need to be yours. You just absorb it and turn it into your own version and become the best version of yourself you can be. And James did that really well. So I think if anyone's on the peak of their mountain or they're climbing their mountain, talk to people that are really good at things that you're not good at, and go and have conversations with people that are doing stuff that you're not doing. And there's a wealth of information out there, and there's a wealth of willing people to share that information as well. And before I started at Avocado, one of the first things I did was go on a bit of a fact-finding mission and pretended that I was going to join a self-employed model to have a conversation with the top person, to get the fact-finding out of them, to find out what they were doing, because I wanted the information. When James decided to, no one knows this in the project, actually, this is a live exclusive. But when James decided he was going to launch the Avenue, or whatever it was called at the time, guess who had an hour conversation with on a fact-finding mission? Me.
Yeah.
And I remember afterwards when he launched, I was like, respect. Yeah, you took me down the path for an hour there, because I gave you all of the information and you've just gone and cracked on. And I love that. I was like, absolute respect for it, because it's exactly what I did. And I think it's the best thing that you can do is get the information and do your own version of it. And I think, James is a perfect example of someone that goes out there, knows what he wants to achieve, knows how to get there, does his own version of it, and whatever he needs to do to benefit his kids, his family, his dynamic, his core foundations, he'll go and do it with tongue in cheek if it needs to be, which is exactly the same as me. So yeah, hats off for doing it.
I think credit to you for having that reaction and being comfortable enough to know that your course is your course, because we've spoken about not getting diverted off stream. I mean, there'd be plenty of people that would have stewed on someone doing that for a week, for a month, holding a grudge for the rest of their careers or life. So yeah, fair play.
You just got to say respect and take it as a bit of a compliment, haven't you? Really, is the way you got to look at it.
Very true.
But yeah, I think it was a perfect way to kind of look at what comes next for James. Will be exactly the same thing. In life, take business to one side, but he'll do the research. He'll ask the right people. He'll ask the questions. Maybe he'll fail in some areas, but he'll learn from his failures. Maybe he'll win in other areas and learn from those. But I think the fact that he keeps a smile on his face will get into the next step each time, really. So really good episode to be involved in.
Even just literally, as we talk about the fast that a couple of the guys are doing in the group, like James was like, I haven't fasted beyond 24 hours. Just goes, yep, I'm up for it, jumps into it, does it. And then even a message yesterday was like, right, what happens after 24? Like, what do I eat? Do I not eat? What do happen with that? Like, and the curiosity of it. It's like, I'm learning now. So like, again, he took that step. I've never done anything before 24 hours. I'm not going to work on it. He's like, right, let's see what happens after 24 hours and then get the information. I'll then develop what I want to learn out of that. So next time he comes to want to do a fast, he's probably better prepared with it, with his own skill set of what works for James in a fast. No different than what works for you and what works for me. So yeah, it's good.
Decisive. I think it's the summary there is just making the decision rather than stewing on it. So Alex, do we want to let anything out the bag about tomorrow? I feel like we need to kind of just let a little bit out of what's going on tomorrow.
How much can we leave out there though? I mean, admittedly, it's going to be. Huh?
Do a clue, mate. What's one thing that is well known about the guy? Well, actually, it could be not known about the guy, and you've got to go and do off your Google research.
Tomorrow, me and Ian are doing a live, a podcast episode face to face, an in-person podcast episode with someone that is a Premier League winner and has had 50 plus caps for England.
And I think as well is the definition of consistently being at peak. That's what I would say. That you can't define it anymore, and it's not going to be the flamboyant character that you may think, but the definition of being at peak and maximising the tools that they were born with, I would say. So
I think it's safe to say that tonight's gonna be quite hard to sleep tonight. It's my own version of Christmas Eve, I think.
Is
not
that
in 4 or 5 weeks' time, but tonight.
Is that playing golf as well, Alex?
It helps. Not gonna lie. I mean, I won't hold any. Let's hope I can get around the course first. I haven't picked up a club for a few weeks, but let's
just make sure the extra couple of taps before you hit in the hole. Yeah, you don't want to beat our guest.
It is raining down here at the moment, just so you know. It's going to be pretty wet out there.
Oh, it'll be fine. It'll be fine. Yeah. It's not going to be raining tomorrow, I don't think. Sunshine and smiles.
Well, I think JHS, well done for a great episode, and you've helped us definitely kind of talk and review it. Great pack member as well. Well done for obviously all the success that he's had so far in life, and whatever he looks to do next as well. And we'll keep talking about it. So thank you for joining us on this live one. Thank you for listening back if you're having a listen on the weekend, and we'll be back next Friday with another episode.
Thank you, guys.
Cheers, guys.